Okay. Next speaker is Emily from Rio.
Hi everyone. So first, thanks to the organizer for having me to this great workshop. So we already heard a bit about, actually quite a lot about bandit games during this workshop. And what I want to do today is come back to the simpler bandit games, in which you don't have a nasty adversary, but just each arm would provide some stochastic IID rewards from an unknown distribution, and you have to cope with that to find good strategy. So I couldn't decide what to talk about. Actually, I had two topics in mind, and so what I tried to do is to find a common denominator, which will be how bandit tools can be used for games. So first, a quick recap of the stochastic bandit model. So it's simply a set of probability distributions. Each one has some mean mu(a) that is unknown. And then you sequentially try this distribution, query samples. So there is some agent that select at time t some arm at, and then observe a sample xt from the associated distribution. Of course, the interaction is sequential. The arm you pick at time t plus 1 can only depend in some arbitrary ways to the previously picked arm, a1 up to at, and the previously observed samples, x1 up to xt. And so usually in this bandit problem, the goal is to find the arm with largest mean or play it most of the time. So we denote by mu star the mean of the best arm in the model. So this distribution can be thought as a distribution of rewards that would be obtained when you draw the arm of slot machines, hence the name bandit, one-arm bandit. But the reason for studying bandit today is more application to online content recommendation, especially advertisement. And so you could imagine that for different advertisements, you have a distribution associated, like a Bernoulli distribution, that tells you whether the user is going to click or not when you present him this advertisement. And of course, you may want to maximize the number of clicks while presenting the ads. And so this Bernoulli bandit model, so just a binary distribution for each arm, will be the focus of this talk, because actually in the application I'm going to present later, it will make sense. And also, like it's an abstraction for, you could replace also this by bounded distribution later, but I think it's a principled way to understand what's going on here. So in a Bernoulli bandit model, you draw an arm at, and then you receive a binary reward that is 1 with probability mu8. Okay, so the outline of the talk will be the following. So first I will present you two different bandit problems in this stochastic setup that are actually quite different and lead to two different types of algorithm. And then these two types of algorithm will be applied to two different game-related applications. The first one is related to Monte Carlo tree search, and using best arm identification tools for this purpose. And the second one is a kind of a competitive game situation that makes sense in the modeling of cognitive radius. Okay, so what is an algorithm for regret minimization? We already heard about regret. So I remind you that regret happens in a situation where you have some notion of rewards, as in reinforcement learning. So here you assume that when you interact with these bandits, the sample you get from the arm are some reward, and thus it is natural to try to maximize the rewards you accumulate during, for example, capital T interaction with the bandit. Because this is stochastic, you care, for example, about the expected reward, and so this is equivalent, maximizing this reward, to minimize the regret, which is the difference between the cumulated reward of an oracle strategy always playing the arm with largest mean mu star, this gets you t times mu star, minus the expected cumulated reward with your strategy. And it is easy to see that the regret can be rewritten as a function actually of the number of times you draw each of the arm. So more specifically, the regret is the sum over the arm of this quantity mu star minus mu a tells you how suboptimal arm A is, and this gets multiplied by the expected number of times you have selected arm A up to time t. So if you want a low regret, you should draw only a little amount of time the arms that are suboptimal. And so you have to achieve an exploration-exploitation trade-off because you're not allowed to draw these arms too much, but at the same time, to learn they are suboptimal, you still have to explore a little bit. So this was rephrased by Vianney in the title of a workshop as learning while earning, because you want to discover the best arm, but while maximizing your reward. And so this makes you behave in a certain way. So good algorithm for this regret minimization problem are the UCB family, or optimistic algorithm. So the idea of a UCB algorithm is, okay, you are facing your different slot machines, different bandits. You have drawn each arm a certain amount of time, and then you can build some confidence interval on the mean of each of this distribution. And so this picture, so the red diamond would be the true unknown mean, and then you have the different confidence interval. This picture represents the plausible, the statistical, the models that are compatible with your observation. And then you look for the best possible model in which every guy would be equal to the largest statistically plausible value. And if this were the truth, you would just pick the one that has the largest upper confidence band. So this is exactly what a UCB algorithm is doing, UCB for upper confidence band. This is actually a family of algorithms, and there have been several refinements as to how to actually build the UCBs. The most famous one is this paper by Auer et al., in which the UCB are built as a simple form, built on Hoeffding inequalities. And that has also a very simple finite time analysis. But today I'm going to take you to the more appropriate UCB when you know you are observing Bernoulli reward. This is the KL UCB algorithm. And what's changing is the way the UCB is built. And it's going to be built actually on this divergent function d of xy. That is the Kullback-Leibler divergence between a Bernoulli of mean x and a Bernoulli of mean y. So this is just some convex function. And so the algorithm, if you want to implement it in practice, you can look at the function d of mu hat q as a function of q. So this is convex. And then you just look for the threshold log t divided by NAT. And here, this will give you your UCB. And so using Chernoff inequality and some sophisticated self-normalized inequality, you can prove actually that this is indeed an upper confidence band. In that, the probability that this is larger than mu a is of order 1 minus 1 over t. So you require an increasing confidence when times go down, which will be the mechanism to make sure that all arms get drawn infinitely often. And so what was proved for this KL UCB algorithm is actually an upper bound on the number of selection of a suboptimal arm A, which leads to an upper bound on the regret thanks to the decomposition I mentioned. And so it was shown that the expected number of draws of arm A up to time t is upper bounded by log t divided by this constant, the divergence of the distribution of mean mu A and the divergence on the distribution of mean mu star. And why we are very happy with this is that there was a lower bound given by Lai and Robbins in 1985 that tells us that any reasonable algorithm that would not just perform well on one problem but uniformly over all problems need this many samples. So in some sense, this KL UCB algorithm is optimal. Here I'm just going to show you the little usual video about UCB. So here you see the evolution of the confidence interval when time goes by and arm gets drawn on a 5-armed bandit problem. And so the algorithm tends to align all the upper confidence band and perform exactly the right amount of exploration in this model. You see that the best arm gets mostly drawn and all the other arms get drawn a little less, just in the right fashion. So okay, this gives us a good algorithm for the regret minimization objective that you can keep in mind, KL UCB. Now I want to turn to a slightly different yet relevant bandit problem called best arm identification. So I can guide you through it with an example. So bandits are used a lot for advertisements, adaptive testing and stuff like that. So you can imagine that you are a company that has several versions of its website. each time the visitor arrives, you can display one of these versions and then observe whether a conversion occurred. Conversion is a target event, like the user buy a product, subscribe to a mailing list, whatever you're interested in. And so you want to study what is the best version in terms of the probability that conversion occurs. If you're in a regret minimization setting, so you will adaptively change your web page every day or for every user in order to maximize the number of conversions that occurs. So you want to make as much money as possible, which makes sense. But you could also be, annoyed by the fact that you have to keep changing your website every day. And you might be willing to lose a little money for a while, the idea being that you've identified the best page and then you will kind of display it forever. So this is kind of the A/B testing perspective in which you want to quickly find the best ARM, but while being willing to lose some money, not maximizing the reward during the process. So this leads to the best ARM identification problem that you can formulate in this multi-arm bandit model that I introduced. The goal of the agent this time is to discover A star, the ARM with the largest mean. For this purpose, of course, it's still going to use a sequential sampling strategy, which is the key part of the strategy. And he will also decide after some time to stop because he's confident that he has identified the best ARM. And then he will make some guess for the best version of the web page. And so this problem has been formalized in several ways in the bandit literature. For example, Bubeck introduced the fixed budget setting in 2010. So the idea is that you know what is the length of your test. You know that you can only use T pools of the ARM in total. And you have to minimize the probability to make a mistake after these T pools. On the other hand, in the fixed confidence setting, you want to identify the best ARM with fixed accuracy. So you can make a mistake only with probability smaller than delta. And then you want to use as few samples as possible to reach this desired accuracy. So this was introduced by Evendar in 2006 and co-authors. And here we even are interested in going a bit further, because in some situations you might expect that you have some arms that are very close to the best arm, in which case it will take you forever to discriminate them. So maybe in the context of A/B testing, you're only interested in detecting some minimal improvement. And so you introduce a little slack, epsilon here, and you just require that the arm you recommend cannot be smaller than mu star minus epsilon. And so this, an algorithm satisfying this is called epsilon delta pack, for probably approximately correct. And so the goal would be to build such pack algorithm that would minimize the sample complexity, the number of draws of the arm you need to achieve this desired property. So I'm going to present you one such algorithm. We will see it bears some similarities with this idea of using confidence interval. But this time the algorithm is not going to be called UCB, but LUCB for lower and upper confidence bound. Indeed, the algorithm will build on the full confidence interval, not only the UCB, also this lower confidence band, LCB 80. And so how does this algorithm work? At each round, you are going to draw first the arm that looks the best so far, the arm that has largest empirical means. And you will also draw among try to find a challenger, an arm that is not the empirical best, but that has the largest UCB. This one is the most likely to be misconsidered as a best arm. So at each round T, you draw these two. This would be the arm in bold here. And the key thing is that you stop when the lower confidence band of your empirical best is within epsilon of the upper confidence band of your challenger. So in some sense, the confidence interval are separated so that you are quite confident that the arm here is the best arm up to this little slack epsilon. So I will show you also a little animation for KL, sorry, for LUCB. So here you see in bold the arms that are drawn. Here's the evolution of the number of pools. And so what is important is that when the algorithm stops, you're gonna align the UCB of the suboptimal arm somehow with the lower confidence band of the best arm in order to achieve separation as fast as you can. And so this LUCB algorithm that was introduced by Kalyana Krishnan et al. In 2012, it has been shown to be epsilon delta pack for some choice of the confidence interval that are also going to depend on delta this time. I'm not going to give details here, but then you will see them in the application to game trees. And so the expected number of draws of LUCB, is upper bounded by a complexity terms that depend on the arm means multiplied by log 1 over delta. Yes?
So do you play BP and CP?
Yeah, at each round you play both. You can also play the least drawn of the two, but for the analysis you require to draw the two. So yeah, you play two arms in each round. It's a bit different. And so here what is important is the complexity term. And so the complexity term for LUCB is a sum over the arm of, so an individual complexity term for each arm. And here for each arm, basically, you have this gap delta A, which is the difference between the mean of the best arm and the mean of arm A. So you have, if an arm is close to the best, you have to draw it a little bit more. And of course, you also have the epsilon that pops in here. So, okay, this is an algorithm for best arm identification. Disclaimer, it's not optimal, but I don't want to go into these nasty details. In practice, you can also use the same KL type confidence interval also, so there are several improvements. But still, it's like a good algorithm in practice and good enough to build on it to do some smart things now in game. So, to wrap up on this introduction to these two different bandit models, so the idea is that we have two algorithms based on confidence interval because of the stochastic assumption we make on the arm distribution, and these two algorithms behave quite differently. The KL-UCB algorithm, because he wants to minimize regret, he will most of the time draw the best arm, so achieve a very good estimation of this arm and a very poor estimation of all others. Whereas when you are doing best arm identification, because you suffer no loss when you draw bad arms, you see that here we draw a little bit more, the second, third best arm, and so forth. So the exploration is is done in a quite different way. And so now I'm going to take these two algorithms in two different situations. So the first one will be to try to use best arm identification tools in Monte Carlo tree search algorithm for planning in games. So this is a joint work with Wouter Koelen that we presented at NIPS. And then the second application, this time of the KL-UCB algorithm, will be to use it in a competitive game situation in which many players play on the same bandits and have to learn also how to coordinate, not only what are the best arms. So this is a joint work with Lilian Besson, a PhD student that I co-advise and who works also in engineering teams working on cognitive radios, and it was presented at ART. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Monte Carlo tree search and how these best arm identification tools can make a difference. So you all have heard, I guess, about the impressive progress of Monte Carlo tree search to build AI for games. The principal idea is that, okay, I'm in a given spot in the game and I want to solve the planning problem. That is, just decide the move I'm going to play next. To do that, even as a human player, you try to check, okay, these are my moves, and if I play that, the adversary will respond like that. And so in your head, you develop the whole trees of possibilities. The thing is that for a game like Go, even a computer cannot develop the whole tree of possibility. And so the idea is to smartly explore the outcome of a few trajectories in the games. And so a Monte Carlo tree search algorithm sequentially selects a path in this tree. So in the general case, you start with an empty tree and sequentially add branches. And so the key point is that whenever you reach a leaf of this tree, you have to evaluate the position, and usually you do it with some playout. So you would play with some heuristic until the end of the game, like an easy to implement heuristic, and output a value, for example, 0 and 1 for this position. And then you add the information you have, and at some point you have to decide, okay, I think this is the best move to do at the root. So bandit tools have been used successfully for Monte Carlo tree search. So there is the famous UCT algorithm by Coxis and Cepesvari introduced some time ago. And the idea of UCT was, okay, each time I have to pick a path in the tree, I choose the next children based on some UCB computed on this tree. But so these UCBs, they are computed aggregating all the information that come from playouts that come from down the tree. So it's not exactly statistically accurate confidence interval. And also UCT is known to fail on some very bad game, and it has no sample complexity guarantee. I cannot tell you how many playouts I have to perform in order to know what action to play as a root. And so what we try to do is to bring some sample complexity guarantees for Monte Carlo tree search, but actually this had to come as a price of some simplification, and so we introduced some relevant but simplified model for Monte Carlo tree search, in which we would fix some max-min trees, so somehow we pre-select the trajectory we want to explore. And then we also assume that when we perform playout in this, the leaf of this tree, we obtain a IID distribution from some, realization from some distribution. And so under this assumption, we will propose new algorithm with sample complexity guaranteed. Also, the big difference is that we believe best time identification tools are more suited to this type of scenario, because if you play with a regret minimizing algorithm, it means you just want to observe a lot of successful playouts. But the robot really doesn't care if he wins or loses when he does MCTS. So this was also the reason we wanted to try to use VAI tools. Okay, so now let me present you this simple model. So you have a game tree. So this will be a max-min tree where you have alternating max nodes, so nodes where the root player is playing, and min nodes where the adversary would be playing. And you also have leaf, and at a leaf sits some stochastic oracles that produce random evaluation of the position that correspond to that leaf. Okay. And so what is a Monte Carlo tree search algorithm? It's a strategy that sequentially selects at time t some path in this tree, so just some leaf here because the tree is fixed, and then query an evaluation of the corresponding oracle. So you explore your tree and you say, okay, I want a new evaluation of this position. And what we assume is that so this evaluation comes from some distribution that has some mean mu n. Actually, here it makes sense to assume they are Bernoulli, because in most of the time this playout is really you play the game and you check at the end whether the root player wins or loses. So our Bernoulli assumption makes sense, in which case the game, like the situation, is fully described by the tree and the mean, the probability of winning that sits on the leaf of that tree. So what do we want to achieve? Actually, our goal is not anymore to find which of these guy is the largest, but we want to decide what to do at the root. And actually, we want to be robust against the best possible adversary. Because if we know the means at the leaf, the probability of winning, here, if we were to decide an action, because this is a max node, a node where you choose the action, you would go toward the action that has the largest probability to win. But here, if you have a good adversary, he will do the other way around. He will try to go toward the action that minimizes your probability of winning. And so if you want to be robust against a good adversary, actually what you require is to find the depth 1 action that has the maximum value, where the value would be recursively defined in the following way. The value of a max node is the maximum value of the children, but the value in a min node is the minimal value of the children. And so what you want to achieve is to find this action S star, this depth 1 action, that maximizes the value. And so going back to our MCTS algorithm, so we have this sampling rule that would tell us which leaf to sample to explore at time t. And then after some stopping rule, we would make a recommendation for the depth 1 node that we believe is the best. And we want, just like before, to have an epsilon delta pack algorithm, meaning that the value of the guess we output has to be larger than the best possible value minus epsilon with large probability. And so our goal is to build such an epsilon delta pack algorithm that would minimize the number of required samples from the leaf, minimize the number of playouts performed by this Monte Carlo tree search algorithm. So this is very reminiscent actually of a bandit model. The difference is just that you have a bunch of distribution, but you not only care about the simple problem of finding the one with largest mean, you want to know this complicating thing that depend on the mean of all arms. So this can be termed a structured best-arm identification problem, a denomination that was recently introduced in the paper by Chaba last out, I think. So we want to solve this problem and build on the fact that it looks a bit like a best-arm identification problem. And so we want to kind of use the same type of tools that were confidence intervals. So we have proved this to be successful tools in simple bandit. Why not in this more complicated bandit problem? So the thing is we are only sampling leaves. So it is easy indeed to have accurate, statistically valid confidence interval on the value of the leaves. But what we care about is not leaf, we care about depth 1 node. So the idea is from this leaf confidence interval, actually we can come up with confidence interval on the depth 1 node. How can we do that? Actually, if you have two means on which you have a confidence interval and you want to build a confidence interval on the maximum, actually you just take the maximum of the UCB and the maximum of the LCB. And conversely, if you want to do a confidence interval on the minimum, you would just take the minimum of the UCB and the minimum of the LCB. And this is exactly what we do. So we define the UCB of a max node at the maximum of the UCB of the children. So here, for example, from these two, you build the confidence interval here by taking the largest UCB. And then for the LCB of this confidence interval, you take the largest LCB, which would be this guy. And so then you propagate up a confidence interval on the next layer. And conversely, in a min node, you would define the UCB as the minimum UCB and minimum LCB. And so from top to bottom, you end up with something which is nice. So upper confidence bound on the value you do care about, the value of the depth 1 node. And it's easy to see that if you're, by a simple induction, that if your confidence intervals are valid for the leaves, then they are actually valid for the whole tree. So in the end, we will just ensure something about the confidence interval in the leaves. So this construction also comes with another thing we need, because based on this confidence interval at depth 1, using a best-arm identification algorithm, you might have an idea as to which subtree to explore. But in the end, we are only allowed to select leaves. So if we want to go there, we have also to decide what is the leaf we will sample in the MCTS algorithm. And this comes actually with the concept of representative leaf. So the representative leaf of an internal node S would be the leaf you end up with if you follow this alternating of optimistic and pessimistic move, meaning that in a max node, you would go toward the children with largest UCB, and in a min node, you would go toward the children with smallest LCB. So this solved a bit the question, like, okay, if my path goes through here, in which leaf I end up, because this is the leaf I'm going to sample. So now we have two interesting tools. We know how to build confidence bound on the depth 1 node, and we know who to sample if we are in a given path in the tree. So we are ready to present like a general architecture that would convert a best arm identification algorithm into an algorithm for solving the Monte Carlo tree search problem. So a best arm identification algorithm comes with a selection rule, so this is BAI step, a recommendation rule, and a stopping rule. And so what this BAI NCTS architecture does is that first you ask your best arm identification algorithm that you run on the depth 1 node, so these are the children of the roots. You ask for a depth 1 node that you want to explore, this is RT+1, and then you query, you look for the representative leaf of that depth 1 node. So this will go until the end of the tree, alternating UCB, LCB, and tell you what to sample. And then you sample this representative leaf, update your information. Of course, this depends a lot on what update the information means. And actually, the best arm identification algorithm we want to use are actually based on confidence interval to make decision. So update the information would just be using the new leaf value. You update the corresponding confidence interval, and then also all the confidence interval in the tree. Because here you make decision based on information about the depth 1 node. So I'm going to make this more concrete with our LUCB algorithm. So this, the instantiation would be called LUCB MCTS. So the sampling rule is very similar. So you draw either your current best or some challenger. The current best, so you have to define also some V hat. So this is not completely clear at the beginning, but if you define the empirical value of a depth 1 node as the empirical mean of its representative leaf, then you can compute this BT, this guess for the best action at the roots. And then you have another depth 1 action, CT, the challenger, that would be the one with largest UCB. And so you stop when the lower and upper confidence bound at depth 1 are going to separate, and then you recommend the current best in your algorithm. So you really apply LUCB at depth 1, and when you go towards the depth 1 node, go down to its representative. So this is the idea of the algorithm. So what could we prove for that algorithm? So if you instantiate it with the following confidence interval, so this is more like the confidence interval of this UCB1 algorithm. They have a very explicit form. The UCB is the empirical mean of arm of leaf L, plus some confidence bonus that decreases with the number of selection of that leaf, that scale with some function beta, and then divided by the number of times you've selected the leaf. And the UCB is the same with the minus. So we proved that for some choice of this exploration function, that will be basically, think of it as log t divided by delta, if this is the t. In theory, it has to be a bit more complicated, but this is what we would use in practice. So for these choices of confidence interval, the algorithm is going to be delta pack. What is also nice about this confidence interval is that they only depend on the number of draws of that leaf. Unlike UCB, there is no t, there is no global time. It means that you don't have to recompute all the confidence interval in all the tree at each time. But when you sample a new leaf, you just have to update its ancestors. So it makes the algorithm better in practice. Okay? And so then the key question is, what is the sample complexity of that algorithm? So we came up with some notion of complexity term with this problem that I'm going to comment on the next slide with a picture. So there is some quantity h star epsilon mu, such that we prove that with large probability the algorithm is going to find the best action at the root and find it using at most of order. So here the big O hides a constant that is absolute and actually quite small. I think it was like 12. h star times log 1 over delta. So this replaces what was involving these gaps in LGCB. But here the notion of gap is going to be a bit more subtle. So I illustrate it on a simple example of a max-min tree where I put some value of the leaf and also recursively compute the value of everybody. So the complexity term is the sum of individual contributions from each of the leaf. And so for each of the leaf, you have the maximum of, so of course, epsilon, and then two quantities. And the interesting one is this delta L. Actually, you take one leaf, for example, I don't know, this one, and then you look at all our ancestors, and you look for a gap between the parents and the children. And the idea being that at some point here, you may want to cut the tree because you see a significant gap between the parent and the children, and so you know that this leaf is not what we call the principal variation, so the one that carries the value of the leaf. So for example, for this guy, the value of delta L would be 0.2 because here there is a significant gap that is larger than the gap you have here. But for this leaf, so the delta L would be 0 because there is never a gap with the ancestor. But in that case, you just suffer the difference you have between the best action at the root and the second best action. So for all the leaf, you have a gap that is strictly larger than 0, and that can be quite large. Here it's really 0.5 because here it's super easy to know that there is a difference in metric. Okay. And so in practice, the algorithm does perform well, so you can never see anything on that slide. So just look at the summary. So we compared ourselves. Okay, so by the way, this is also another variant of BESAM identification algorithm that we studied here. We compare ourselves to the available state-of-the-art at the time. That was an algorithm by Teraoka et al. Called Find Top Winner. And the algorithm is interesting because it's based on this elimination philosophy. It keeps on sampling all the leaves. And when it spots a gap between the children and the parents somewhere, it just cuts the tree and removes all the corresponding leaves. So this was the available state-of-the-art. And so we are really reducing the sample complexity a lot. And here you have very small numbers, like this is I don't see it anymore. This is a 1, a 6. So there are some leaves that are in practice drawn very little amount of time by the algorithm. And so what I would also like to mention is that we should now add another algorithm to this picture, an algorithm called LUCB min-max that was proposed in a paper by Chaba and co-author last year. And their algorithms, they came up with it using different motivation, but when you write it, it ends up being very similar than our algorithm up to the choice of the two BT and CT arms. But so yes, so this tells you that this algorithm we were not the only one to came up with, so maybe it's a good algorithm. Okay, so that was it for the games. Of course, yeah.
Just a quick question. Can you comment on the link between the gap and that was on the previous slide and the choice of the representative leaf nodes, and also how you go about picking the representative leaf node in the case where you have stochasticity?
So the representative leaf, you would, so yeah, ideally you would want to sample the leaves that would reduce, like make the confidence interval shrink the most.
Yeah.
And so the proxy we found for that is going towards a maximum of UCB, minimum of UCB alternatively. And the reason why we chose the representative leaf in the following way is that it ensures when a node is a representative leaf that the confidence interval are going to be nested all along the path.
Okay.
And so this tells you that when you sample such a leaf, inside your confidence interval, you have all the means, all the value of all your ancestors, if your confidence interval are accurate. And in particular, the size of the confidence bound has to be larger than the gap between a node and its parents. And this is why this gap naturally comes when we have these nested properties on the representative leaves.
And how do you deal with the fact that in real world games, right? You can never go down all the way to the bottom. And so
Yeah, so the idea would be, you know, you pre-select with some human knowledge of whatever, some types of strategy. So I did implemented it, well, a colleague did it for me on simple no-go games, stuff like that. And here we would fix the depths as maybe 2 or 3, what we can compute. And sometimes it does better than UCT, sometimes it doesn't. So it's not uniformly better, but still it's a different idea that I agree the next step would be to take it to growing trees or stuff like that.
But at that depth, then, do you do just standard Monte Carlo rollouts from that point on, or do you just do the heuristic to pick
So he did the plain Monte Carlo, and then he did also some heuristic, and the heuristic are of course better. Then our IID assumption is completely violated, but you know, it's just to find new heuristic maybe, and then twist them in a different way to come up with something that works. So I agree it's a theory work. So are there other questions on the game 3? Because I'm going to talk about something quite different in the next step.
How small is this gap? Sorry, how large is the H? On, let's say if you're expected done with your assigned randomly.
Actually, we didn't look at this, but I think it can. What we don't like about it is that it involves a sum over all leaves. Currently, we are looking into having just square root of the number of leaves, because in the good case of alpha-beta pruning, that's what you end up with. But what is cool is that I guess if they are assigned at random, because you always take the maximum over the ancestor, at some point there will be a not too small gap in your ancestor, and so each of these individual contributions can actually not be too large. But yeah, the problem is that they are all there, and we believe they shouldn't be. So, are there other questions before I move to something else? So if you didn't like the 3 parts, okay, yeah?
If you look at the lower bound for this, is it tight?
So it's not tight at all. We have a lower bound, and as all the INIS structure-based arm identification problem, it has an ugly form of an optimization problem. We managed to solve it for depth to tree, and indeed it revealed in a depth to tree that there are lots of so these lower bounds, they give you somehow a way you should allocate your samples between all the leaves. And sometimes it should be 0. So we really believe that this should not be a sum over all leaves. So we are currently looking on simple tree to try to match the lower bound, but it's still a long way to go. Okay. So now it's, if you didn't like the previous part of the talk, you can switch you on again and talk about something else. So this work was motivated by a PhD student who work in electrical engineering labs and want to find a new standard for Internet of Things communication. And so we started small by something we can do in bandit models. So we are still in a stochastic bandit model, as the model I described at the beginning, but this time there is not just one agent picking arms, there are M agents that simultaneously choose arms at everyone. So each player, so player J is going to pick an action AJT, and then what you may want to look at is whether player played similar actions. So you look especially if player J experiences a collision. So he experienced a collision if there exists another player that picked the same action as it did. And so the reward, of course, will be affected by the fact that a collision occurs. And so our modeling assumption is the fact that so the reward RGT received by player G at time t is the product of 2 things. So first, the reward of the arm is selected. So we denote by YAS the stream of rewards produced by the arm. So if at time t he selects arm AJT, then he receives this reward. But then he only received the reward if no collision occurred for him. So if he was the only one to select that arm. And so the goal here would be to find a way to maximize the global rewards of all the players. So the expected sum over the time steps and over the player of the reward they got. And we want to do that without allowing any kind of communication between players. Of course, they will all use the same algorithm that will make the coordination for them. We assume that nobody is trying to screw you among this M agent. So why do we study this problem? So in the field of cognitive radio, you may imagine that the agents are some smart radio device that can choose at each time between different channels to try to communicate. And the arm, they would model the background traffic that exists on these several radio channels. So typically, at the first work on cognitive radio, I assume that we were in some kind of licentiate world where there are some primary users that are paying for using the channel. So when these guys are here, you have to let them use the channel. And the thing is that primary users, they don't crowd the network too much, and you hope to be able to communicate when the guys are not here. And so then the arm will just tell you whether a primary user is there or not. But these models, this method, they are not planned to be used in unlicensed radio frequency bands where everybody can communicate. And in which case, if you want to coordinate M radio device, you would model the traffic on the channel, but by some random variable that would tell you if somebody else, using other standards, for example, are here or not. And of course, you are not alone. It's not just one device that will make decision at each time step, but it's several radio devices. And typically, the reward will be binary here as well, because usually what we measure is whether the channel is free or not. When it is free, we assume that the communication was successful, and the goal in all this device is to maximize the number of successful communication of the radio device. Okay, so here actually we could come up with different feedbacks, because remember that the reward is the product of the actual reward from the arm and whether you get to receive it or not if a collision occurred. So the agent is always going to observe its reward, because usually in a radio system, the base station is sending you an acknowledgement to tell you that he received your message. So you can always say that your reward is 0 and 1 if you succeed to communicate. But you may want also to know whether you received 0 because you collided, or you received 0 because the primary user was there. So in the ideal case, you would observe both. This is, of course, a bit unrealistic, because it's hard to distinguish a primary user from another of your friend radio device. And so a common assumption for the licentiate protocol is to first always observe the value of the arm. This is because in licentiate protocol, you would first do some sensing to check whether there is a user with a higher priority. And if he happens to be there, you know you will not even try to communicate. But if the channel is free, if this is 1, then if you didn't communicate, you know it's because a collision occurred. So you first observe the sensing, the value of the arm, and then the collision. So this is the model we will be working on. But the actually most interesting case for the IoT type of communication that happen in unlicensed band is to consider that you just observe the reward. And this is much harder to handle. But so most of the talk will deal with the sensing case. Okay, so what the notion of, we can come up here also with the notion of regret, which will be, as usual, the difference of the total reward you get if you played with the best possible strategy. So what is the best possible strategy here is to just assign the M player to the M best channels with no, always in an orthogonal fashion at each round. And this gets you an expected reward of the sum of the M best mean in the model. So we assume that mu star k are the order mean in decreasing order. So this is your oracle. Always orthogonally allocate the M player in the M best channels. And of course, then you have the expected sum of all the rewards up to time t. And so we came up with some way of rewriting the regrets in 3 terms. The first one is very similar to what you have in a classical bandit. So you want all these devices not to select too much the bad channel. So you have the sum over all the bad, so smaller, larger than M channels of some gap between the M best and the mean of arm K, times the number of times you've selected this bad arm. The third term is also easily interpretable. So we denote by CKT the total number of collisions that occurred on arm K. So if 2 players collide, it counts at 2. It's really a number of time player experienced collision. And so, of course, you are going to pay something for collisions. And here, the third term is a bit more complicated. But basically, a good strategy, you would all the time be playing inside the M-best arm. And so you expect that this will be very small. Because at each time, you should be playing one of the optimal channels. And so with this regret decomposition, our idea was, of course, as usual, to come up with lower bound and then analyze some algorithm. And so for the lower bound, we can prove that this sum of 3 terms, not that so this one is not always positive, so it's a bit tricky, but we can still prove that the regret is lower bounded by the first term, like in terms of the number of suboptimal selection. And so we came up with a lower bound on this, which might be a crude lower bound on the regret because collisions do happen as much as the number of suboptimal selection. And for the upper bound, we can prove that this middle term can be actually expressed in terms of the 2 other. And so this just means that if you want to analyze an algorithm, you have to control 2 things. The number of selection of the bad channel, because you expect none of the players to ever end up trying to playing there. And then the number of time collision occurs on the best channels. And yeah, just to learn to orthogonize, collision will happen on the M-best channels. Okay, so I'm going to present you a new algorithm for this problem that is actually inspired by existing ideas, but they are combined in a different way, and we propose a new analysis. And so the algorithm is still based on the idea of using UCB. So especially we recommend the use of KL UCB. So because we have sensing information, when you play an arm, even if the reward is 0 due to collision, you still have observed the random variable associated to the arm. And so you can build an upper confidence bound on the value of that arm. And the idea is then you want to know what are the M-best channels, because you don't want to play elsewhere. And so you are going to estimate these M-best channels with the M arms that have the M largest UCB. And so this idea was already used in these 2 algorithms. So TDFS is an algorithm that uses this plus a pre-agreement on people as to when they will target the first or second best UCB and so forth. And Roran uses a simple system of rank assigned to the player, but we got rid of that. The idea for our algorithm is very simple. We just make sure that at every time step, we pick one arm that is in the set or estimated set of M-best arm, and then we try to switch arm not too often. And to switch arm not too often, we used an idea proposed by this paper by Rosensky et al., the idea of doing some kind of musical chair, meaning at some point committing to an arm, fixing oneself on an arm, and not changing even if we experienced collision. So we introduce this variable SJT that tells us if at the end of round T, the player J decided to fix itself on the arm he's currently playing. And when you are fixed, you are just going to keep on playing the same arm. Okay, so let's process this MC top M algorithm. So first, you check at round T, you check if the previous played arm is still a good arm, in the sense as it's still in this estimated set of M-best arm. If your arm happen to have no UCB that is too small, then you have to leave it because it looks bad. And so when you leave it, you reset your fixed state. You're no longer fixed on it. And then you carefully select a new arm in the set of arm with largest UCB. So this is the key, carefully is the key part. But so if your arm, your previous arm still looks good, and if you experienced a collision and were not fixed, then you choose a new arm at random. But if you experience a collision and were fixed, you will keep on playing the arm. And when you keep on playing the arm, you fix yourself on it. So you fix yourself if at the previous round I was alone on the arm and it's still in the set of M best arm, then just I keep playing and will not consider changing. So this is the MC top M algorithm. And just a word on what carefully means. Actually, what you do is you are not going to select an arm at random in the set of M empirical best arm, like M with largest UCB. You will make sure that you move on an arm that had previously a smaller UCB than yourself. And this will help you control the number of times you switch because the arm is leaving this should be a MJT. Okay, it's the first time I give the talk, so there are still typos on the slides, but we can take it offline later if you're interested in the analysis. Okay, so just last view on the algorithm. So you start, you're of course not fixed. Then if a collision occurs, you stay not fixed because, okay, I don't like the arm. If your arm happens to leave the set of good arm, you're also not fixed. But you're going to fix yourself when no collision occurred and the arm still looks good. And in that case, if collision occurs, you just stay where you are. And so the analysis of the algorithm just boils down to controlling all these different types of transition, to make it short. And then you, of course, if your action leaves the best state, then the only way to defix yourself from the arm. Okay, so these are just the summary of what we could prove. So we gave a new upper bound on the number of times we select bad channels that scale with some, again, KL divergent terms. And we could prove actually a new lower bound on this quantity, telling that at least the algorithm is optimally selecting the good channel. Well, this is optimal, but the part that is still not optimal and that is actually very difficult in all these cognitive radio analysis is controlling the number of collisions. And so for this, we came up with the new analysis telling us that so we have also a logarithmic number of collisions. So we have in particular a regret with, a logarithmic regret for our algorithm. But this is kind of a big ugly and can be quite large, but it's smaller than what existed in previous work. I think that I will, in the interest of lunch, skip the curve, but we are there. And just some perspective on all this work. So yeah, in this type of cognitive radio resensing model, it would be really great to come up also with a lower bound on the number of collisions, because in practice they happen more often than the number of times you select bad arm. And also, yeah, we have some idea of what to do without sensing, but it's still super heuristic and doesn't work all the time. And for MCTS, we already talked about that with your question. So I will stop now, and thank you for your attention.
So, regarding the number of collisions, you have this number, it's like log T over this K on divergence. So how large can it be in the first?
So what is bad is that here you are really the sum, you pay the difference between all the arms. So in particular, this analysis is also only valid if all the mean are distinct. So this is kind of a big limitation. In practice, it's not that big. But,
yeah, and as this T goes to zero, does this explode? Or
oh, you mean having some kind of worst case? Yeah. We didn't try to do that. We hope it's the square root T, but still, no, maybe not. Okay, yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, we should look at that.
So
m equals k, then the problem is trivial. So you assume that
So if m equal k, actually you just pay, your only problem will be the collision, but then you can come up with a way of having a constant number of collisions by playing a musical chair. And,
so which is the hardest?
I don't know. I'm in the middle, or we didn't look at that, but yeah, it's not clear. It depends on the mean also, but yeah, of course, m equal k. Actually, our algorithm achieves this constant progress. This is also a nice thing.